Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this 4-episode series sponsored by Sage Publishing, my guests and I will discuss how libraries are creatively supporting faculty and students in their remote teaching and research. Our guests will describe how they quickly adjusted to and expanded their remote learning environments as COVID-19 spread across the country last spring. We'll also look at how those changes evolved as they moved into summer and began to plan for the fall, and I use this term loosely, reopening. Plans that include new approaches to customer service, reconfiguring physical spaces, and developing easier remote access to library services and resources. Joining me are Linda Van Kuren, Assistant Dean for Access and Resource Management at Georgetown University, Sally Gibson, Library Director at Missouri Western State University, Kat McGrath, Renewals and Collections Librarian at the University of British Columbia. In this third episode of our 4-part series, our guests discuss what, so far, has been working, what hasn't, and ways in which the libraries are pushing resources and services to the point of need. So we've touched on this, off and on in our conversation already, but I want to kind of provide a bit of a special focus on physical space, which unfortunately, for a lot of you will no longer be the attraction it once was, which is really unfortunate since so many libraries have shifted to more open and collaborative learning spaces. And I'm wondering how each of you are kind of coping and dealing with that new reality, including some of the changes you've had to make to your physical library environments. Linda, you mentioned you feel like you're going to be down to about 25% capacity in terms of foot traffic. What are some of the changes you've had to make?
Yes. Since we're primarily an electronic library, our library primarily is study space, team-based learning space, and group meeting space. And so all of that will have to change in the upcoming few months at least. And so we anticipate that we'll be using a seat reservation program, for example. So we will cordon off the library and cordon off seats into a socially distant seating, and then have students reserve each seat as they come in for the day. We also are dealing with things like health checks and temperature checks, and working through all of the ramifications of that for the upcoming semester.
Okay. And then Sally, how about you?
So the cleaning has been a strong focus. I think when you look back and think how often the library
Right.
has been cleaned in the past, you get a little worried. So what we're going to do is when someone leaves a space, they need to text us or stop by the circulation desk and tell us where they were. And we've numbered all the tables and numbered all the spaces, and then we're going to clean after each use.
Mm-hmm.
And so hope for kind of some peace of mind that when people are using the space, they can say, oh, yes, an effort is being made to keep this clean. And then, we're doing a mask mandate. And to be here, you need to wear a mask. And so, so we're talking about that because, there's problems with, encouraging the mask use. But I think as we're moving along closer and closer to the semester, I think more people are willing to wear the masks. So I'm hoping it won't be as much as a problem as maybe a couple of weeks ago I was thinking it would be. But I think those are kind of some key changes that we need to make. So because people also still need to feel comfortable in the space.
Right. And then Kat, how about you?
Well, we do have two campuses in our smaller Okanagan campus, which has about 10,000 students. They've kept the Research Commons area open throughout this whole period. And it's essentially a study space, but there's no access to stacks or staff. And we're looking at opening a similar space on our Vancouver campus. I should mention that we just began our curbside pickup service last week, and it's all contactless. There's no interaction with people in a sense. And different models have been, the UBC Okanagan campus uses a locker system where people are told where they can go and pick up the material, and we're doing something different in Vancouver. But and the demand, I guess, for our print collection is is really immense. So we had over 1,400 requests in the first week for books, and so looking at how we can support that service going forward is definitely where people are putting attention now.
Right. Sally, Kat, I just mentioned curbside pickup, and I know I'm pretty sure you mentioned it too. Can you talk a little bit about how that model works?
We had mostly faculty requesting because most of our students were online this summer, so they probably weren't in the area. But what they do is they can reserve it through the catalog, and then they just have to call us when they're on campus. And we have two entrances from the library that they could be out. They could either be at the street or they could be kind of on the campus side. So after they reserved it and then it's ready, they'll get an email telling them that their item's ready, and that we'll hold it up to 7 days. And then when they come on campus, they just need to call us and tell us where they are, and then we'll bring it out, and we'll do the contactless delivery, and we'll have it in a bag and just set it down, and they can pick it up. And so it's working quite well. We're not as popular as Cat is, but we've had faculty requesting it pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel confident in kind of our system of how it works.
Right. Good. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about sort of the idea that obviously you're the way you service your patrons and library community, particularly in how you interact with them, has to change and is changing. Sally, you had mentioned, sort of the changes in the way you're interacting and having to deal with face-to-face patrons. But I'm wondering, particularly in sort of with the emphasis on the online environment, some of you've increased your chat functionality. Are you, training your staff or working more closely with your staff to on how to handle customer service in a digital environment versus a face-to-face one? And Linda, I'll just kick that over to you.
Yes, we've had all this time to practice helping customers in the virtual environment, and so I feel that most of the staff and our student staff are now comfortable in providing either instruction or service, answering quick reference questions and so on in the virtual environment. If we do move to a physical environment, we need to almost retrain ourselves due to all of the health restrictions we need to take and considerations we need to take in a physical environment. We're also facing a situation where we rely heavily, like so many libraries, we rely very heavily on our student population to staff our service points. And given that most of our students will be virtual this semester, we may not be able to, in a physical environment, maintain the same hours of operating. We were open 24/7, 365, and it'll be very, very difficult for us to maintain that when most of our student staff will be unavailable for physical work.
Right. Sally, how are you guys dealing with this?
So for training, I think the one positive of having everyone working from home is that we were really able to find out what it's like to be a distant student who's off campus. And so we were kind of able to troubleshoot some of the issues that they'd run into, or just have the overall experience of what are they going through to have the virtual library experience. So I felt like we weekly talked about some of the issues that we were running into and how we could make that better. And so that was probably a nice benefit, that we were able to kind of improve our service and virtual experience for our distant students and work on that.
Yeah. What were some of those issues you came across?
So we had, with the Lean Library, we had, because we just launched it in February, so we had a couple bugs with some of the resources that I'm not sure we would have discovered otherwise, because we were actually using it from off campus and things like that, making it like someone was on they were on the Amazon website and it popped up with you might have library access, and so we kind of figured out well, that was kind of odd, and kind of work with that. And so that was helpful there. And then we had more chat. Chat hasn't been as popular among our students, and so now they were using the chat. So that kind of gave us more practice in using the chat and kind of providing chat reference that way. So
Okay. And then Kat, how are you rolling with this?
Yeah, similar to, and well, in the sense that because certain things have stopped for certain work that people have traditionally done, in particular public services, they've been redeployed to support and be trained on doing the chat reference and so on. And I think people have really enjoyed having a different interaction with students and so on. So that's been very successful, and we've definitely seen a demand and need for that. In terms of some of the sort of expanding, having virtual consultations and making use of some of the software tools that are a bit, whether it's Zoom or Collaborate or some of these other methods of interacting with our users has been both a learning experience for people on all sides. And again, I can't stress enough the importance of partnering with the other units within our teaching and learning technologies group, graduate studies, and so on how to reach people.
Okay, excellent. And so we've been talking about a lot of very significant tactical and operational changes to the way your libraries function. And so I'm curious, and I apologize for not making this question available to you earlier, but how all of this is perhaps, if at all, changing the library's relationship to administration and what they may be asking of you or what you're reporting back up, and or just sort of the ongoing communication that you have with campus administration and or even other departments. And Sally, I'm just going to kind of throw this out to you to start.
So our university kind of declared financial emergency in February, March, and so we reduced a lot of faculty positions, and we kind of eliminated some academic programs. So our whole campus is kind of having a thinking about where we're going in the future and what we need to focus on. And so the library is kind of included in that conversation. We can't do everything for everyone is kind of what we have all decided. And so we're having to kind of reset. And so we're thinking about, these are our core functions, and this is what we can do. And this has really forced the conversation, because we've all had conversations like that in the past, but you still continue trying to be everything to everyone. And so, and now with our, we're not having as many student workers, and so we are having to reduce hours. So I think some of those hard choices were made for us just for the budget, because of the budget situation. And so now we can kind of figure out, okay, how are we going to move forward? And then, what's our next step and what's really important? And so the campus as a whole is kind of having those conversations.
Right. Kat, how about you?
We haven't been given any indications about a budget cut at this point, but we're definitely preparing for, we're aware of the uncertainty. So all of our spending, there's talking about positions that there hasn't been any positions lost, but there hasn't been any positions gained during this period as well, even though there may be some needs identified. And I think just to follow up on the library has responded to the service requirements. I just have to say again, we do get a lot of demand on our print collections, and trying to figure out ways of accessing that and providing access to that is going to be the focus for some time.
Right. So, Linda, in our previous conversation, you mentioned how you're attempting to, and I hope I'm getting this correct, attempting to integrate resources even more than they already are, and this is kind of taking shape as you describe it, a point of need concept, particularly in a hospital environment. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on this. It's to me that was very intriguing. How this all came together, and how do your patrons use it? And then are there other point of need scenarios where this concept could also work?
Yeah, so we actually have a position that is currently empty, but it's a library application integration manager. And the goal of that position is to integrate library resources at the point of need. So it can be anywhere at the point of need. One example of how we've done that is the library provides point of care tool for our hospital users. So these are tools meant to be used at the bedside to help with diagnosis, to provide evidence-based treatment options, and to help with uh, drug information. And we've provided those point of care tools. They're usually apps. And then we've also provided the physicians with iPads to use those. And so we feel like that brings us one step closer to where they need the resources because they're very busy. And so they need them right at the point of bedside rather than leaving and then contacting the library and asking us to look something up. We've also integrated our library research guides into the course management system. So it's no longer a link that students click to then exit out of the course management system. The library content appears right within the Canvas site. And so those are the kind of endeavors that this position implemented and supported throughout with all the library services. So it's very wide open, and that position is just to look for these kinds of opportunities to make things easier for our patrons. Lean Library is also a tool we're using, and we're using that as well to help get the information right there where the patrons are needing it. So when we have a PubMed workshop, Lean Library message pops up and tells the student that's using PubMed that there's a workshop on that tool that they can sign up for, versus them finding out through an email or something that's kind of disconnected to what they're doing.
That's excellent. And Sally and Kat, I'm wondering if you're doing anything similar, or if not, I mean, just kind of off the top of your head, where you might be able to, if at all, incorporate something similar.
Well, I actually like Linda's idea of talking about the workshop with the Lean Library Alert. We've been kind of doing our COVID messaging or saying things with other, your resource might be available here. But I think that is what we need to focus on. Is we've talked for years about being there at the point of need, and I think continuing to find those resources and ways of meeting the students where they're at is what we need to focus on. And that's why I kind of like the Lean Library product, because I think it's moving us in that direction. But that's really what we need to do, because we have students that don't start with the library, and so we need to reach them.
Yep. Kat, same with you, or?
Yes, and I guess this is my chance to just say this one of the things when asked later, what did you do during the pandemic? I can say that, well, we implemented Lean Library, and I don't think that we could have done it as quickly without the kind of sense of urgency that we were facing at the time about we wanted to do whatever we could to facilitate access to our resources and services, knowing that people were working in a different capacity than they had done previously. So I think we went from signing the paperwork to launching within a couple of weeks, which is, talk about an unprecedented kind of a situation for us. And we've been able to get, I think we're close to 1,000 users within just these few months, and just with learning as we go. And I am very intrigued by some of the ideas that Linda and Sally have mentioned on how they're either using Lean Library or are planning to, with all the additional resources that we've been trialing and piloting during this last period too. We're looking at making sure that people are aware that when they're out there, that this is something that we're now considering and to giving us feedback on.
You just heard from Linda Van Kuren, Assistant Dean for Access and Resource Management at Georgetown University, Sally Gibson, Library Director at Missouri Western State University, Kat McGrath, Renewals and Collections Librarian at the University of British Columbia. This series is brought to you by Sage Publishing. Join us next week for our final episode of this series when we look ahead and speculate over which services and workflows will likely remain, even as we return to some semblance of normal operations.
I see a need for even more librarians to have very, very strong technical skills. So experience with programming, with using APIs, with identity management. We need even more individuals that understand standards and the technologies that are needed to connect our library systems with non-library systems. How do we integrate into wherever our patrons, whatever format our patrons are using to do their work? How do we get the library there for their use? In my mind, those skills are essential to continue to provide the curated quality evidence that our patrons need to succeed in their jobs.
If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if there's a topic you'd like us to cover, drop me a line. I'm at bmickey@ala-choice.org. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.